The Frontiers of Criticism by T.S. Eliot. Discuss the frontiers of criticism according to T.S. Eliot. Or what does Eliot mean by the two extremes in modern literary criticism? Literary criticism has had several shades and modes throughout the ages. Each age, like each individual, brings to the contemplation of art its own categories of appreciations and makes its own demand upon it. But the primary motive behind such endeavors has always been the same. It may have been explained and interpreted in different ways and in different ages. Even Eliot has explained it in two different ways and at two different periods. In 1926, he pointed out that the essential function of literary criticism is the elucidation of works of art and the correction of taste. But in 1956, he himself felt something lacking in this definition, so he again defined it as a piece of writing which can promote the understanding and enjoyment of literature. He does not mean to say that enjoyment and understanding are the two different activities. At the same time, he does not take understanding for explanation. Explanation is only a means to understand, it is never understanding. For example, we may explain the meaning of each and every word and phrase in the poem. Even then, we may not understand the poem. The meaning of a poem does not lie in isolated words and phrases. It lies in the coherent collection of words and phrases. Besides, enjoyment is not different from understanding. We cannot enjoy a poem unless we understand a poem. At the same time, we cannot understand a poem unless we enjoy it. This showed that enjoyment and understanding are the two different aspects of one and the same thing. We cannot value one more than the other. If we overemphasize understanding, we may slip from understanding to mere explanation. Explanation of a poem very often diverts our attention from the poem to the poet. In this way, we may understand the poet, but we may become forgetful of the poem. This is dangerous, as we should judge the poem, not the poet. Besides, we should not overemphasize enjoyment. In such case, we may fall into impressionistic criticism. We should always remain on guard against these two dangers. It is not a fact that a literary critic is purely literary. A critic who is interested in nothing but literature may have to say nothing to us. His writing would be a piece of pure abstraction. Just as a poet has other interests outside poetry, so a critic has many other interests. He may be interested in philosophy, ethics, psychology, etc., but his prime motive always remains to help his readers to understand and enjoy a piece of literature. That is why the fundamental question at the time of discussing a piece of literary criticism is it aimed towards understanding and enjoyment? If it is not, it should be accepted as a contribution to psychology, sociology, and philosophy. But It cannot be a piece of literary criticism. That is why Eliot has distinguished literary criticism from biography. It aims at explanation of the poet instead of explaining the poem. In fact, the function of a literary critic is to make us see a point in a poem which we have never seen. For example, De Quincey has made us look at knocking at the gate in Macbeth as a significant point. Criticism makes effort to remove our prejudices, likes, and dislikes. It brings us face to face with the poem. The intelligent reader manages everything himself. He examines the pros and cons of a piece of literature. Then he forms his own impression about it. His duty is not to judge, but to make judgment possible. His task is to decide what is good and what is bad. The critic should relate it to the society in which he lives and to other works with which it is in some sense comparable. The critic's job is not only positive, it is negative too. He is expected to point out what is bad and what should not be enjoyed. He should condemn the second rate work and expose its demerits. It is in this context Eliot used the word correction of taste in 1926. These are the frontiers within which a piece of criticism should swing. If a piece of criticism crosses its limits at one end, it ceases to be literary. If it crosses the limit at the other, it ceases to be criticism. So, criticism is a serious endeavor operating within a specified limits. Eliot has discussed different schools of criticism in our age. They are different in method and manner, but at bottom, all these schools are trying to hammer home the same point. Eliot, as a critic, is not rigid, he is flexible in his approach to literature. He revised his own opinion from time to time. For example, The Frontiers of Criticism is an improvement upon his own essay entitled The Function of Criticism. As a critic, he is highly objective and impartial. He prefers to keep mum where he is ignorant. Besides, he accepts his ignorance with utter humility.